I'm sorry, Mom. It is one of my words.
So, the Knuckles series has finally dropped on Paramount Plus, and with that, we're really coming to the part of the year where all sorts of things are finally releasing. And even though this is a Paramount Plus production, I did get around to finally seeing this series, but bloody hell was it a ball ache to try and do in the UK. For whatever reason, it was saying on the website that it releases April 27th, the Saturday, which is markedly a lie. So with just the entire universe trying to get me to not see the damn well Knuckles series, it's just the UK region being blocked again on timing. Finally, I did get around to watching this thing, and also part of my internet research, I heard that this was going to be 6 one-hour-long episodes, a real kind of Fallout parallel that I'm really going to have to sink my teeth into. And then it turns out, no, they're 30 minutes, it's fine, it's 3 hours, it's a little thing. I was trying to make preparations for that midnight launch. I guess I can't believe everything I see. It's a random Nintendo Life article that was wrong. Also, it was midnight for the UK time zone, so it wasn't even coming out in the US at the right time. I've been going through a ball ache. But nonetheless, I've been churning through this series as fast as I can, and let me be as early bird as I can as I go through the qualities of the Knuckles series. I'm actually a really big fan of the Sonic movies. I think the first one is a little bit bland and safe, but that makes sense for what it's doing. Sonic 2, however, is a movie I am, head over heels for. I think it's a really well done video game adaptation, the second one of this new video game era that we seem to be stumbling through. I have high hopes for Sonic 3, and the fact that they're making a TV series as part of a cinematic universe to flesh out the characters and do a little fun thing on the side sounds brilliant. And even looking at the visuals that you're seeing right now, shuffled in all sorts of orders, you can see it looks visually stunning. If by this shuffled random footage you happen to be finding Knuckles is even in the shots. Let's get into how this series is very much a Paramount production, shall we? So starting off with episode 1, things are pretty great. You get a classic backstory of Knuckles up to this point. There's all sorts of cameo appearances from practically everybody, and it works really nicely as just a pretty decent, solid episode to go through. Naturally, they do call out the fact that James Marsden is out of town, but the fact that they were able to bring in Sonic and Tails and he's here pretty consistently in his first episode is really good. The plotline is essentially that Knuckles doesn't know how to rest and stop being in warrior mode and just relax, since he doesn't really feel like home is a home. Choosing to meditate instead of turning on the warrior mode and then making himself at home with all the things you've seen in the trailer. He makes a right old mess. It's a whole shebang. Also along the way, there's a shameless Doritos plug right at the start that they even put in the trailer, so they better get their sponsorship money. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have here Wade Whipples. If you don't remember him, he's one of the side character cops, the comic relief guy, who's gonna be the main protagonist of this spin-off series. Other than Knuckles, of course. Whereby now, Wade is participating in a bowling champion tournament, and then just as quickly loses his place on the team to a little child. Now, it's at this point I already started to notice one caveat that I think would be an immediate improvement on this series from a more nitpicky place of mind. Maybe it came more prevalent as time went on and I realized this is 3 hours and they somehow haven't done this, and that is the soundtrack. This is very much like a Disney TV series soundtrack. It's just orchestral music following a beat and... you have the entire audiology of the Sonic franchise at your license. There are all sorts of Knuckles themes or just the general vibes of his kind of soundtrack, and none of it is used. There is, I don't think, a single Sonic soundtrack reference in this entire thing. Maybe like the title sequence has like da-da-da-da-da-dum for like the Sega logo. I don't even remember it. And that's a real shame because this feels a little less Sonic-y by going for this lower budget approach. The fact that this is presumably a pretty low budget series, considering they're already doing sponsorship plugs in episode 1 and the trailer, but they're able to showcase these CGI characters in a way that's faithful to the actual movie series is brilliant. That is a massive notable uptick. It does also in some places feel a little low budget. On the other side of things, there are some brilliant surprises. Christopher Lloyd appears as the Elder Echidna. He's a ghost who appears in the attic. I don't fully understand how that makes sense, but he goes on to say that Knuckles here needs to take on an apprentice, and even goes on to say you should pick Wade. To which we see Wade crappily training as part of a montage. Knuckles is grounded for his antics at home. He ignores that and goes onto a road trip with Wade, and thus our story begins. This episode is essentially 90% of what you saw in the trailers, other than some very short shots that basically spoil the rest of the plot, and it's decent. Where this series really tries to focus for some reason, and it's even prevalent in all of the other marketing and the clips and the lines that they share, there's a lot of emphasis on this kind of Marvel quip thing. You know what I'm talking about? Like in the car. Sometimes it's decent delivery, and sometimes it is cringe.
Knock, knock. You gotta say who's there.
Who's there?
Nicolas Cage.
And these early extracts are really gonna start overgrowing as we go later through the series. Meanwhile, on this main plotline point, there are a couple of agents who are tracking down Knuckles and kick some British guy into the mushroom universe on the side. Knuckles goes to the bowling alley place where he learns a little bit of Wade's backstory with bowling. There's all sorts of pop culture music montages to coast over the place, and then there's another just shameless name drop in the form of mentioning TJ Maxx. And to finish off episode 1, the agents appear in said bowling alley, they have a miniature fight, which is brilliant. We're here for the Sonic characters and their action sequences, of course this is going to be decent. But at the same time, the agents go out of their way to kidify the plotline.
We need his power. It's the whole reason we're here, to get his power and sell it for lots and lots of money.
In a way that just makes the thing a whole lot more lame than it was before, and Knuckles is kidnapped. Solid first episode. You've got all sorts of characters, all sorts of ways to lean you into it, the visuals are great, the action is brilliant. We've seen Knuckles the entire runtime of this series. There's just a couple of cracks along the way because they have youngified the Sonic demographic. And maybe that's valid. Although the first movie was already 4 years ago, so really the 5-year-olds they were marketing at the beginning are already 9. But anyway, episode 2 is an interesting one, as Knuckles now spends probably about 70% of this episode locked in a cage, with Wade deciding he is going to follow them to where Knuckles was taken and get him out. Flashing back to a random Will Smith movie as his motivation. This series is unapologetically very, very jokey, and the more I start to describe them, the more you're gonna feel the genre of this comedy. A big chunk of this episode is then Wade imagining how he's going to montage his way through and save Knuckles, using all of these Home Alone-esque tools to make his way happen. And then naturally, he comes in to do the real thing and it all goes terribly. It's a very standard format. There's a lovely part where he's being rocket punched around everywhere and he sounds like Scooby-Doo. But this episode really starts to make those cracks a little bit bigger as it's so much of non-Knuckles content, which is just the classic pitfall for all of these live-action hybrids, especially as a series. If you are marketing towards younger kids, you really gotta pander to what the younger kids are here to see. They're not here to see Wade whip nipple, they're here to see Sonic stuff. The human part is boring, and they try to stitch it together with comedy that sometimes works, like Kid Cudi here being the agent that has to call his mum in the middle of a fight, but it's kind of like a dime a dozen, you know? Wade beats them by spraying sriracha sauce into his eyes. They call the female agent Uma Thurman at one point. I guess that's a gag for the parents. And then he punches the Knuckles cage to explode it, and off they go. This next bit is really, really nice though, whereby you see Knuckles gliding out into the night with this really nice, visually interesting sequence of human plus Knuckles, a different human, you know, than James Marsden, but, you know, it works out as a really nice, beautiful moment, but it's just a pocket against the rest of this just mess. They even make a gag about how he can only glide a little bit, and then he starts spinning and landing quickly to the ground. That's nice. And following that, they then have a food break. That's another shameless plug for marketing. They've got Lay's chips and I think some chicken brand in there. How are they plugging in another shameless product item? This is the IP of Sonic the Hedgehog. That first movie made $306 million and they had sponsors in it. The second movie made $405 million. It is so shameless that even in this third semi-rendition, they're making these sponsorship plugs when they're already making so much bloody money. And you know this is entirely a Paramount thing. If it was a simple connection with shoes or chili dogs because it relates to Sonic, that works great. Why am I getting adverts for Doritos and chips as well? Not even healthy products to be advertising in your kid's movie when you are already so successful financially. Like, it's genuinely getting towards evil. And from a literature perspective, this is starting to feel like a Woody Woodpecker kind of series. You know what I'm saying? A little while back, we had a look at the new Woody Woodpecker trailer that's a thing, apparently. You know, it's like the cringy, straight-to-DVD home video streaming cringe that they somehow have plugged onto Sonic, and it's a weird 50-50. This is like two entirely different projects smushed together, and nothing is mixing. You're just sometimes on one tone and sometimes on another. Anyway, Knuckles doesn't compliment Wade, saying that was mostly out of luck that he was saved. The agents decide that they have to follow him because they can't back out of the deal out of the real big bad. Wade goes on to monologue about how he was betrayed by his father who left him. And Knuckles says he has no way he can call home after his tribe is finished. Wade adds another stupid line about his dating profile.
My dating profile, Wade Whipple, solid 3.
They road trip away to another pop culture music track of Rock You Like a Hurricane, but at least the lighting is different and nice, before hearing that there is a manhunt for Wade from the radio, choosing to go to his mum's place where she immediately faints. That's the humor. I think the road trip scene is really the one that loops this round the best because it looks visually great. To see this road trip, it's a classic road trip, sure, but the lighting and the color is nice and visually interesting. All the while, Paramount clearly doesn't have the respect to its audience to think it can do anything other than constant pop culture choices every episode. I think there's 3 per episode. 18 just pop culture music tracks shoved at you. It is the definitive example of just corporate tick boxing. And for the first time, we do have a song that's vaguely relevant to Sonic, in that there is an original lyrical song sung in the credits of this episode, talking about how an echidna and a fox and a hedgehog and Wade's gotta learn to be a warrior. Why is it in the credits of this episode and none of the others? I don't know, man. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. I guess the only other place you're really gonna find actual Sonic references is in the title sequence. Visually, you know, he's wearing the hat like he does with that one cowboy outfit. There is a sort of nudging wink to Sonic Underground, which is great. But anyway, after seeing that title sequence one more time, we then come to episode 3. Oh, this, I think, is the worst episode in the entire series. Funnily enough, it's the only one I watched with friends, and it's really a first impression. Clearly, the first episode had all of the swing to it, having all of the cameo appearances, all of the CGI shots possibly involved, yeah? This episode is the pit of the budget. Knuckles barely appears in any of it, and the actual story is non-existent. It is a short story that you could literally skip, because the mum now is here. She doesn't faint. Apparently she faints later in this version of the story. It's all about Wade and Knuckles being invited into the family, yeah? Whereby there's Wanda here, his sister, who's an FBI cartoon character, still acting like a child in the most irritating and argumentative of ways. Wade also retorts back as a child because that is the humor. Kids love when adults play as kids. And I guess it's relatable at the dinner table, but ooh-wee is it cringe. And that's their 2 gags sorted for this entire episode. The third gag is the fact that the mother here is Jewish and is pushing all of these Jewish cultural moments at the dinner table. And that could be an interesting spin for a story. It's all about Knuckles learning culture as he progresses on this adventure, learning what it's like in the human world and actually accepting other people. And, you know, from episode 1, just blasting his format to, by the end, warping into someone else's, being a little bit more this and that, you know? But it doesn't go that way. There is no storyline for Knuckles, the actual character, and everything in this episode is delivered like cringe. The baby children are arguing about knowing someone a gun. The mum refuses to pronounce Knuckles' name the correct way. There's a million religious jokes and references in a way that feels a little unfitting because it's it's not really getting used in any way other than caricaturizing your characters in a way that doesn't feel earned or well done or written in any capacity. It's also run into the dirt. This is a 15-minute scene spent at the dinner table, just constant back and forths of Knuckles and religion. This girl is a child, Wade is struggling, and then it ends in the most horrendous of ways. The girl, by the way, is the entire source of all of the arguments this entire time. She refuses to accept Wade for any of his achievements or anything, having this sort of superior complex and always arguing about everything. The mother does sort of nothing and says, "Oh, you're both the problem, shut up," the whole time. It then escalates further and further, infuriatingly in this argument that's not progressing the story, and Knuckles is just there vaguely. They don't cut to him very often because they're cutting out on the CGI budget there. And then finally, the argument ends with... Oh my god! This is not how you write child entertainment. What is this? I can't believe I'm watching this. Why would you do this? What is going... And it doesn't get addressed. It doesn't get approached. The mother doesn't do anything related to first aid. He just yanks it out and they continue along their... Are you mad? Following that is then a little bit for the parents in the room. You know, the original Sonic fans of the fandom. The 90s kids. This is the next scene for them, alright? Because Wade is next in his bedroom, untouched since he was here as a child, with a million old posters to all sorts of movies. You see them, you know the ones, it's very classic. The only poster that's not actually a reference to something else is the fact that there's a poster of his father. Okay, I guess that'll come back later. They also use this time to chuck out another Keanu reference, which I hope they bloody well mention that Shadow the Hedgehog sounds like Keanu.
Stallone, Keanu, Bryan Adams.
I have a feeling they won't, but it's nice that they've established a Keanu call-out twice now in this franchise. Wade goes on to ramble about his Wade Jammers 99, his personal mixtape, which is a recurring theme for some reason, which they then use as an excuse to just play another one in your face. And then they make uncomfortable jokes about American Gladiators with a cutout of a buff woman and be like, wow, you sure enjoy this. Ha 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 ha. All the while, there's almost a genuine scene with Knuckles and the mother talking about how they used to be a really close family, but they've drifted apart with time, vaguely. And then some grunts rock up. I like a micro gag in there about how the sister is reading a book that says how not to be caught off guard. But then, of course, it's an action sequence after we've been waiting for 20 minutes at a family dinner table with 2 entire jokes to it. Finally, every family member is attacked. One by one, they're having their own little sequence, and Knuckles goes to each of them and saves them one by one as well. Pretty standard. What is really nice though, beyond the FBI badge joke, which I apparently enjoyed, I think I'm falling into this Paramount comedy trap, is that the fight scene with the mum specifically is really, really good. This is in fact the best shot in the entire series, I would say. It's just a simple shot of the camera spinning around the table with the candles in the very center of the dinner table, symbolic to the mother's desires and motivations. She even says, don't let them touch the candles. And then there's a big set piece as everything goes flying around in the background. Of course, the destruction is CGI'd, and you can kind of tell, but it's the one big shot where the best of the budget goes in. It's really nice, wholesome family fun. The mum's the only one that can fight. That's great. This feels like a Sonic movie extract. This is the pinnacle of the series, somehow found in the absolute deepest, darkest trenches of this entire series. She's then very content saying, my kids finally came home for this stuff, even though they didn't do anything for each other as a family, and it's the best dinner they've ever had. End of episode. That is some of the worst example, because it is so little Knuckles, it is all cringe comedy, but then the finale, the final 3 minutes, mwah, that's good. This episode, of all the episodes, is the one that wraps the entire series in a bow, because in this moment, it's Wade Nipple that is the main protagonist, and it's not gonna interest kids. They don't want to watch a 15-minute dinner scene. Why have you made a 15-minute dinner scene? So, if you thought Wade was the protagonist of the Knuckles series last episode, episode 4 is the one that really gets you going. Wade is in a lovely mood against the destruction of his family home, and then he's taken away by a motorbike guy. You saw this in the very first trailer, and when Knuckles says he needs to learn to escape himself, he meant that literally, because Knuckles does sweet FA in this entire episode. He is actually gone. this entire episode. You can see the footage shuffling. I bet he's at the house if you're seeing him. Unless you got the random puppet Knuckles shot, in which case, we'll get there. This episode is a ride. And speaking of ride, it turns out the motorbike guy is in fact the guy from the bowling team earlier. Yeah, you know, the knockoff Stephen Ogg guy? Yeah, it's him. He's now going for the bounty that's on Wade's head. And Wade, over this entire episode, is going to have to do some character growth and changes and development in order to get out of this scenario. He's trapped in a cage that's electrified along the back of this stretched Hummer, and he's consistently electrocuting himself with the very classic low-budget film student electric shock visual effects. Trust me, I've seen it, I've edited it before. It's classic amateur work. To which he then appears, and this is a really interesting direction, by the way, in the spiritual realms of a bowling alley with the older Echidna of all things. Knuckles earlier in the series did mention the great battleground in the sky, and Wade himself did say that the bowling alley is his battleground. So this is literally his heaven. Why is he here? What is going on? At least there's somebody CGI in this damn episode. But what is the justification? Well, it turns out that the Christopher Lloyd Echidna is now going to teach Wade the ways of his Echidnan culture and give him a great big lesson. Even though he specifically showed up to Knuckles to be the one to teach him, but I guess the mentor could do it in the spiritual realm now that he's pseudo-dead. Great. And not only is it going to be told to him, it's going to be...
I'm going to have it sung to you as part of a low-budget rock opera.
Yeah, and they followed through on that, by the way. Half of this episode is now going to be told in rock opera form. And you know, I think I've cracked what this is. It's not just that this is Paramount to a T. This is very SpongeBob movie coded. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about the first SpongeBob movie. I'm talking about 3 and 2, you know? There's a lot of live action bits with live action celebrities, and they're just out here having fun. This looks like it was lovelily a good bit of fun, even if I don't know the bounty hunter as a celebrity. And maybe this will convince a child that it's interesting. They're telling the lore and the entire backstory of Knuckles, presenting the disruption of his tribe and all that came afterwards. I do love the random puppet shot after all, but it's also so very not Knuckles. This is all just a live action presentation. It's Paramount making a thing, but it's not really what we were going for. When you tell kids there's gonna be a Sonic movie, really, what they're wanting to see is an animation, you know? Animation works better for Sonic. And that's not even to say, actually, that humans can't work alongside Sonic. I was a big fan of Sonic X, and that works really well. As long as the human characters are enticing, actually diverse, they have more than a gag for their personality, and are just written well and merge well with the story. And they don't have entire episodes dedicated to only humans and leaving the interesting main protagonist casts off to the side. But this is not that. It's a fun presentation. I'm sure if I was on a cruise, I would love this. Oh wow, they did a whole good bit. I love the costuming. But to put it in the middle of this Knuckles series, it's an uphill battle, and I think it's 50-50 whether it wins. But before we go any further, I just wanted to say thank you very much for making it this far into the video. You're halfway through. I'm going to use this time to quickly tell you to check below to see whether you are subscribed, to keep up with any other future movie reviews coming out later this year, or later in the month, because May is stacked full, I tell you. And I'll quickly poke you to tell me your thoughts down in the YouTube comments or on our Discord server. But otherwise, thanks for getting halfway through, and I'll let you get back to the rest of the Knuckles series, and my slow descent into madness. They do finally show some references to the 2D gameplay. That's nice. That's the bare minimum. It is practically the only Sonic reference there is. Wow, remember when Sonic was 2D? And in Green Hill, and the 2D reference is literally based off of level 1111111 from the first game? It's got rings, grass, and a loop-de-loop. Nothing to do with Knuckles, it's literally just the quintessential Sonic reference. You couldn't get more vague if you tried. Which is stunning because I would also assume that the audience for this is expected to have seen at least the first Sonic movie. It's treating it like it's a fresh start, and it's so insultingly condescending in places. But I do like the occasional thing. It's nice that there's puppets of the bee creatures and the line, "Glorious quest for glory." Knuckles never was a lyricist. Also, they then bring out the fact that Knuckles had to fight a giant demon of some sort. A demon that vaguely looks like Chaos. We're never going to see him in CGI because they don't have the budget for it for his backstory. But it's really a nice bit of puppetry. Brilliant. We're going to learn how he went to beat the powers of him all. Oh, and even the demon starts to say some lines as part of the lyrics. What is it that he has to say?
That I might hit face, but marketplace a freaking cool stuff.
It does another shameless plug advert in the absolute middle of this incredibly successful cinematic franchise. Are you kidding me? This is so... I don't want to call it unethical, but it's really, really shameless. And I think this is the worst example. It's fine enough if it's visually there in the background, or if you maybe tongue-in-cheek say the catchphrase in a way that makes everybody groan and roll their eyes. To have the literal big boss that would be a brilliant sequence to see in actual CGI as a real dramatic scene, but of course they're not going to do that because Paramount, and it's not a Sonic character. No, that they'd still make non-Sonic characters. I don't know. But to actually have him show up in the middle of the lyrics and do it, like literally breaking the plot line as we're trying to learn lore because we're paying attention. Oh, God. Anyway, Wade cuts things short, realizing that the secret is in his punches, and then immediately leaves heaven and wakes up. To which everyone's like, oh no, don't leave early, that's not the right lesson. To which he ignores them, comes out of the world, punches the lock with his fist, electrocutes, screams again. By the way, that's been a running thing this entire damn time. And then he's back in the lore world, whereby we learn that Knuckles almost lost to the demon for being unskilled and untrained. A warrior's true strength comes from within, yada yada, you've heard it all before. All of this Knuckles lore, and there's not a single Knuckles CGI shot in sight, before finally, apparently, Knuckles earned flame fists. And that's how we beat this monster practically instantly. But there's a problem with that. You see, you're telling me that the very first idea that Wade had, that the powers was inside his fists the whole time, was wrong. It turns out the secret behind Knuckles' superpower here is that the power was inside of his fists the whole time. Oh, okay, now he can punch his way out of the cage because he flies out through the ceiling. This doesn't come back. It's not explained. What are you doing? Who? Oh my... Like, I guess it's still a cool presentation. I get the idea. But also, how do you flub that very clear, contradiction right there? Anyway, he gets out of the cage and has a duel with the bike rider now. There are some random kids in the background that are just witnessing from their bikes. The guy on the motorbike says, you need a vehicle to duel me. Oh, look, what a surprise. There are kids with bikes right here. It's stupid. It's cringy. And then against all of that, with each a sword in hand, Wade somehow wins. Yeah, okay, sure. He gets all of his clothes. The guy runs off into the sunset without his bike. Wade has had his full protagonist episode, successfully getting himself out of his cage, and returns with the motorbike and hat to come back to Knuckles, who never came to help the whole time. The two then drive off with the family behind in a car, all across the desert, with Reno just 100 miles away. Episode 5. This really is the stuff you're here for, right? It's always nice to have a buddy cop road trip movie with a CGI character, but you saw in the trailer that Knuckles wears the hat and he goes to the casino lands. This is where the good stuff is supposed to happen. Right? Reno Vegas is a fake place invented, not from the Sonic universe, because to be fair, this is meant to be the real world, but also it's not Las Vegas, it's just a fictional middle ground, and the very fact that it is a casino land is itself a Sonic reference, as is Knuckles wearing a hat. It's a bare minimum, I guess. Nice one, Parry. There is gangster music underneath his driving, which is vaguely fits with the Knuckles soundtracks of the past games, but it's not actually a reference. The family then go to split up around the halls and lobbies of the casinos, with the sister calling both Wade and Knuckles dorks, even though Knuckles clearly isn't. And Wade immediately spots his father, spinning around in a slow-motion montage of Let Me Entertain You, because pop culture music is the only way Paramount can keep your little kiddies' attentions going. Following that, we have another cringy live-action exchange whereby Knuckles is giving Wade the dialogue to say, leading to lines like, I've grown into a very powerful adult man, which is the least cringiest line of the options. Knuckles is complimenting a mascot, which is, I also think, a very basic, easy CGI joke you've seen before. But the dad is surprisingly on board with seeing him. happy that he's taking part in a bowling tournament, and says let's catch up after the game. The agents, by the way, are around. We haven't seen them for several episodes, it seems, being taken in by the big man villain. I didn't pick his name up. I mean, calling him the Tinkerer this whole time. Oh, apparently it's the Buyer. I'm not sure if any Sonic character has ever had a "the" at the start of their name before. But hey, this is not a Sonic thing. This is just Paramount making stuff up. After 4 or 5 episodes now, we last saw him in episode 1. Finally, Rory McCann makes his appearance. He threatens the agents and then spares his life, saying you now work for free. Now your prize is the fact that you get to live. And he is faintly interesting. He is an Iron Man villain, you know? He used to work for Robotnik. He's tinkering with this drone. He does stuff. But if you think it's gonna get interesting, prepare yourselves. What follows now is the bowling tournament of champions. When a kid comes to a Sonic movie, they expect to see Sonic. When a kid is put in front of the Knuckles series, you know what they want to see? They don't want to see Knuckles doing anything. They want to see 15 minutes of a live-action bowling ball tournament. And that is what they get. And the whole time, in a very classically terrible fashion, there's always 2 hosts just talking at you. They have a catchphrase for this bowling ball competition. It's,
"You roll some bowling balls."
The joke is that it's cringe and bad, which is always great when you're trying to make a joke not cringe and bad. Flying a little closer to the sun there, aren't you? That being said, if there is one thing I do compliment about this scene, I do like that the dad literally has a teapot inside of his bowling ball. Weird that they made him British when he's clearly not the actor or the character, but that's meant to be part of his shtick. Alright. Also now suddenly, for the sake of the plotline, Wade can now suddenly also get a strike every time, when he was specifically earlier in the series struggling and lost his role because he wasn't getting strikes correctly. But don't worry about it, he's ultra super champion pro material now. But first we get a pause from the bowling alley. Don't worry, it'll come back. He's having a chat with his father, whereby the dad somehow does go on to say, "I never forgot about you and I always cared. I collected all of your Jammers CDs that you've been burning and sent my way. I've only been a coward for not messaging back to you." Which is interesting, and the fact that he actually does have the CDs on him without knowing his son was going to pop up to him at the beginning makes me think that's genuine, which is a surprise for where the plotline I thought was going. Also, Knuckles has been missing the past 10 minutes. He was in none of that bowling alley montage. He was away because otherwise something would happen. Again, I love when my Knuckles series has a notable missing Knuckles in it. The mum is then there immediately afterwards to Wade. We still have not seen Knuckles this whole time, saying that you should be careful around your dad. He likes to leave. You know, the classic standard kind of normal family relationship plotline. And then the dad goes on to show off his penthouse. They have more chats about all the fancy things you can have, I guess. And then we come to see that immediately he's come to betray Wade, giving up him, his mum, and his sister to those agents. Whoa. And what do they have to say in response?
"Hey, Dad, you suck. Like, so hard."
Oh, I hate this. Why? It's so kiddie. I know it. I think it's the over-childification of Paramount's version of Sonic that really kind of just gets under me. But of course, that's the demographic they're going with, so I still don't think it really works. There's then another gag about how they try to threaten his sister's life and he doesn't care, but he threatens his mum and he's instantly on it. Vaguely, they're good comic relief, but a lot of the times it's just uncomfortable. And so Wade does the big, bad, scary thing by instead actually choosing to betray Knuckles and sending him upstairs to the penthouse without himself to be shot to death by the agents. No real resistance, just a sad, pitiful expression the whole time. But it does mean we do finally get to our finale. Oh, we're finally there. Episode 6. With a mini recap of the end of the last episode. Knuckles thinking to himself in the elevator and then being completely bombarded upon. To which he successfully gets out of the way. Our brave hero is just a mascot distraction that wasn't in the elevator when he went in there. He's hiding in the ceiling because it turns out...
Knuckles has been listening the whole time.
But why? Wade went in there specifically because he went to go see his father at the penthouse. He didn't go there knowing the villains were going to be there. Was he just randomly spying all day on his friend for no apparent Why would you set this up? This doesn't make... It's a Deus Ex Machina that you haven't written well enough to actually justify it. So it's so childish, man. It's really written like you're not allowed to be more than 12 to watch this movie. It is insultingly poorly written, from a narrative perspective and from a comedic perspective. It's just schmuck! And that's such a shame, because the actual Sonic cinematic franchise seems so solid. I am a little dicey on the Keanu Reeves casting. Am I allowed to point that out at this point? I think Keanu Reeves is fun. I don't see him as a solid voice actor. Even if it didn't go with the fan choice of Hayden Christensen, I feel like Keanu Reeves is just the popular play, you know? He's at his best when he's doing Cyberpunk, and I have a feeling he's not going to say any Cyberpunk-like lines. But hey, I'll save my skepticism to when we actually see the third Sonic movie. Anyway, with Knuckles magically having all of the answers, the big fight scene comes in. Finally, some fun. The action is the highlight, and it's not exactly spared from, like, the quality of the Sonic movies. So it's nice. There aren't that many shots about it, but it's fine, it's the finale. There's probably a big thing coming up that's already been shown as an entire scene clip from the marketing material. Wade is also here, struggling by, rambling that he's here to save his family in a way that just completely undertones the entire sequence. The sister as well is doing her classic annoying thing, whereby she refuses to be saved by the guy, saying she'd rather do it the FBI way and dislocate her own thumb to get out of the handcuffs. Knuckles actually wins the fight this time by punching the portal rings that are aimed at him, and also they're suction portals that are attached to each other, which is a little weird. And then the agents are removed from the entire existence of the universe, I guess, cosmically. I don't know what happened there, but it's an ending, sure. And then the final joke of this, best scene of the episode in the last, 3 episodes. Bearing in mind that this series is very clearly aimed for an under 10 audience that has been so kiddie and goofy this whole time, then has the sister out here with her thumb literally dislocated from her because she successfully got the handcuffs on. Ugh! This really is a Paramount production, except they've gone right back to the disgusting era of SpongeBob episodes. This is just the thumb infection bloating mess as last time. Why would you show this when you're specifically making a series that's aiming and pandering to such a younger demographic? Ugh! This series is so good visually, and it's nice to see more of this world, but it sucks. But now the action scene's done, you know what the kids really want to see is bowling tournament time. Remember that?
The deals at TJ Maxx cannot be beat.
No, I wish my dad left.
Ugh, just end me. There's a mild story beat about how Wade doesn't show up because it's basically that one story arc in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. Oh, sorry, am I not allowed to mention that character? The dad declaring himself the winner because of a no-show. Then he shows up. There's some inconsistencies in the camera that aren't going to be addressed, like the commentators are still talking in the background when they're meant to be silently listening to them in the foreground. And then it's the big final moment of the whole wahoo. It strikes, and then more strikes. Before finally the dad only hits 9 pins and it wobbles and doesn't fall. And then Wade does it. It's 9 pins and then it does fall. Wow. It's scripted sports again. And it's bloody bowling. Is there a Venn diagram of Knuckles fans and bowling? I don't think so. I mean, is there any sports that we ever see Knuckles doing? All that comes to my mind is Olympics from Mario and Sonic Olympic games. And I'm certain that doesn't have bowling in it. But as we finally come to the end of it, we then have Knuckles, of course, spotting the buyer outside in his giant mech now. Not quite sure why he couldn't do that before, considering nothing's changed. He didn't get any more quills. He didn't earn anything from Knuckles. The agents never got anything. Why is he here now? I don't know. Also, it was just part of the marketing to show this moment in the trailer, and also as just as shared clips to get out there. This is just the finale of the series, already on show. But anyway, he's out here a la the final boss for Tails in Sonic Adventure 1, I guess, and immediately knocked out, with the buyer saying I thought he'd give more of a fight. This is meant to be the final climax of the series. It's okay, it's meh. Oh my god, I think I've even caught a mistake. I think the mum here, in calling out for Wade to go and reach this scene, says, "Go get him, Wayne."
Wayne, where are you going?
To help my friend!
Or something like that. His name's not Wayne, it's Wade. Did they not want to do a recall? Did they not want to do any ADR? How did you miss this? God, this series is untrying. Knuckles is unconscious in the back, and Wade shows up as the final resort behind him before the buyer, where he then goes on to monologue to an unconscious, unhearing echidna. He's also got the giant Knuckles fist that one agent had throwing bowling balls at the guy, which is, I guess, interesting. And he goes on to monologue of how your heart, Knuckles, has never been bigger. You fight for your family. You fight for your friends. I'm Marth from Smash Brothers. You do have something to fight for. It's a home. Oops, I've ran out of bowling balls. That's like the monologue finale for the character development of Knuckles, I guess. But Knuckles hasn't really had any development this whole series. This has been Wade Whipple-Nipple, the series. He's the one that's gone through any character growth and development. What's Knuckles done? He's not adjusted to humans. He's followed along the way. He occasionally has to fight people, and then he wins. He spoke to the mum, vaguely learned about culture, and then went to the casino, fobbed around, and then is now in another fight. He's done nothing. He's not learned anything. It is actually a waste of time, narratively, this story. Unless you're really here for the comic relief cop that isn't James Marsden. But then as all is lost after being unconscious the entire time, now Knuckles Deus Ex Machina's in, empowered by a monologue. And he has literally never lost a fight this entire series. He's never been shown that he is wrong, and he's never been in any real conflict of himself. The closest you can count to a fight he lost is the first part of this fight, which was 10 seconds long. But now he activates the thing. It's the Flames of Disaster, his flamey fists we heard about from the giant Facebook Marketplace advert. From there, generic rock music comes in as he goes on to insta-kill everything, punching through every whip arm in a singular punch. No Knuckles-related music, nothing Sonic-related, just generic rock with no impact to the action, just a punch sliced through like he's a pair of red scissors. Only then doing something vaguely interesting by catching the giant bowling ball decoration and crushing it onto the buyer. We never see him again, he is canonically dead. And all of that was done literally in an instant. How long was that? Like 60 seconds max? It's the big finale action sequence, and it's shorter than the bloody spinning shot with the mum earlier. It's not even a satisfying ending conflict. It's too instant. It's one punch man. But hey, at least you can't say it wasted your time. The host of the bowling tournament also then just keep talking and going on. The dad takes the trophy. The mum takes the trophy off of her ex-husband. And Wade and Knuckles go on to say, "We won!" And then they unironically jump freeze frame. That is not even a joke. Oh my god. That's the ending. No epilogue, no follow-up, not really. It's just, hey, we won, jump, we're done. End. They were cutting it down to the nail of we can't show any more Knuckles frames. We've already lost the budget that we somehow spent after the God knows how much sponsorship money they got from Facebook and Doritos and Lay's and I don't remember the other ones, but they're in there. Oh, okay, but there is one final thing. You can tell the budget's waning. It's a post-credit scene of motorcycling back home, whereby Wade is apparently the size of a small child in this green screen. As Knuckles finally says the words, "This is my jam," as they ride off into the sunset with the song of the title sequence for this series. The closest thing to a Sonic soundtrack reference we're really ever going to get. I was so excited for this series, and visually it looks great. It's nice to see more of this universe. I'm on board. But, this is a Paramount series. This is simultaneously the heights of the Sonic movie and the pits of bloody Woody Woodpecker, which is Disney Plus and not Paramount, but you get the idea. It's such cringy child TV series stuff and not nearly enough Sonic. Ironically enough, I think the biggest mistake is just the fact that it's a series. I initially thought this was 6 hours, so the fact that it's only 3 is probably a relief, but still, this is too long. With a full 3-hour runtime, there's so much extra fluff. Half of an episode Knuckles spends in a cage, another 15 minutes he spends at one dinner table. There's an entire episode where he's not there and we're dealing with the spiritual realm and a motorbike. And what this really needed was to be shaved down to get rid of all the fluff. We don't need the full bowling tournament montage contest, do we? If this was a movie, if this was just 90 minutes, cut it in half, this could have been brilliant, because the narrative on a bigger scale is 7 out of 10. But by making it with all of this extra fluff, with so much horrendous comedy, cringe delivery, and just it's insultingly condescending, this is abhorrent. None of the characters are good. Wade is the only one vaguely close to depth because he was established in the first movie, but even then, it's kind of just one track. He's just the pitiful loser guy. The villains are poor, every character is one note, and Knuckles himself as a character barely grows. This is a Wade Whipple series, and Knuckles doesn't learn anything by the end. Not even Christopher Lloyd gets a goodbye or anything, he's just there for 2 scenes and then, He never loses a fight, he never has to pay the cost of anything, he has no sort of inner conflict or even a challenge to overcome. He's instantly perfectly set up for everything, with the exception of that one 10-second bit. I really wanted to be on board with this Knuckles series, but the downside is it's a Paramount Plus production. It's just another corporate streaming service running it into the ground, with clearly a notable jump down from the care and quality of the Sonic movies. Shamelessly coming out with all of these sponsored little bits inside of a franchise that's making them so much money. They SpongeBob movied the Sonic universe. And it clickbaited us all into really getting into it by putting all of their weight in the first episode. And that shows. Really, considering the highest heights of the vague Sonic elements and the lowest lows of a Paramount straight-to-streaming thing, I guess this stands as solidly mid in the middle. It's a 5, but you could skip episode 3. And if it wasn't for Christopher Lloyd, you skip episode 4 as well. Just watch the beginning and end. That will cover you, honestly. I don't know if I'll go so far as to call this the terrible Knuckles series, but boy is it getting there. I'm so glad I stayed up late to find it at midnight, to then find it wasn't available in my time zone, to then find out that it was for some reason delayed a single day in my region, and all the other hurdles I had to go through to watching just schmuck. I only hope that this isn't a symbol of the rest of the franchise, and is just a blip on the radar for this Sonic 2.5. But hey, it's not like Sonic isn't used to being very much disadvantaged in quality. On that unfortunate note, I'm gonna end things off there. My name's been Daz. Thank you very much for making it to the very end of this lengthy video. I'd love to hear your thoughts and rambles about this series. And I shall see you in a little bit.